Everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, the channel that covers all things rock. Please don't forget to subscribe. Hello, we've got Peter Jones back in the chair again. How are you, mate?
Mr. Kerr, pleasure to see you, sir.
Pleasure to see you as well. And when we're going to talk about the artist known as Ronnie James Dio, I have to get you in the chair. Good to have you on the show.
Pleasure's mine.
Absolutely. The premise of today's show is that we're going to put a spotlight on some Ronnie James Dio vocal tracks or band tracks or solo tracks that need a bit more love. So it's a bit of a deep cut show. So we're going to pick 5 in no particular order, going over all the different eras of Ronnie James Dio. Take it away, Peter Jones, with your number 1 pick.
Excellent. Jump right in. This one comes from 1996, from the sessions from the Angry Machines album. And that album as a whole kind of needs to get a little more love. So we'll say that. But this is a Japanese only track. It was not on the US track. It contains the lineup that was on the album, except a different bass player. Jerry Best plays bass. But it's the track God Hates Heavy Metal. And this is just a powerhouse, stunning track. And I really wish that it had been included in the US version, because it really would have been one of the staples. It's a heavy track about religion, contradiction, and the notion that the stereotype that somehow all heavy metal is the devil's work. And, you know, his lyrics, we learn slowly, evil's in the holy, incidental, God hates heavy metal, so I know he must hate me. And then he goes later on and switches it and he says, God is heavy metal, so I know he must love me. And he goes back and forth. But it's a stunning track, super powerful. The band is great, and Dio's performance on it is exceptionally strong. So God Hates Heavy Metal. If you can find it, if you can find the Japanese version, you should find it and you should hear it regardless. But God Hates Heavy Metal. That's my first pick.
Nice, nice. Look, Ronnie in his lyrics is very much, he plays 2 sides of the coin. Dark, light, night, day. So the way you were describing that song, he's doing 2 sides, 2 personas.
Yes, he does.
Whether God does love heavy metal or God hates heavy metal.
Well, and his other line that's really great is, live, don't preach it. If you can't, don't teach it. Accidental, God loves heavy metal, so I know he must want me. Yeah.
Well, I think he always was one for the fans, and sort of related that the fans were a bit downtrodden, bit sort of neglected in the media. And that sounds like it's a bit of a war cry to the masses to get behind the music that, increasingly around the 90s was becoming quite marginalized.
Yeah. He did become a lot more larger. I don't want to say political too,
I'd say Petey was a bit angry. He was getting a little bit angry because
Angry Machines and Strange Highways are 2 of his probably heaviest records.
And if you follow the trajectory of his career, like in the 80s, he was on top of the world. He hit the peak, but in the 90s, it was getting a bit rough.
Well, he was also, there's some anger that carried over after the fallout of the Dehumanizer era. So that had a part of what he had carrying inside him, which made for some really great heavy music. So
nice pick to start off the show. I'm going all around the shop. So I'm going to start off with a deep cut from the Rainbow Rising. People would say, is there any deep cuts? Yes, there are deep cuts, and it's Starstruck. Now, Starstruck, it's a kind of a well-known song, but I'm talking about 2023. It's regarded as a deep cut, and people don't talk about enough, and they need to love it because it is a fantastic riff, a fantastic song, and a great melody line. It's a song which I kind of inclined to think Richie, when they were writing it, was saying, come on, Ronnie, let's do something in the real world. And Ronnie was putting a bit of an observational lyric about this particular lady that used to turn up at rainbow shows and stalk Richie Blackmore. So I've got a record that I picked up in England, and it's a promo that corresponded with the Australian tour of 1976. It was like a radio DJ was interviewing Richie Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio, and they were talking about various tracks, and they came to Starstruck, and Ronnie said that, yeah, it was just basically written about a lady that was following Richie everywhere. And that's basically it. So it's a bit of a stalker song. I love the riff. It sort of reminds me a little bit of Strange Kind of Woman. It's got that sort of that groove. Yep. And Cozzy's just having a ball. Yes. So there's two types of Cozzy on or cozy. I say Cozzy, but cozy. There's two types of cozy on Rainbow Rising. You've got the absolute metal thumper, and he's just, masterclass in drumming. But in this track, he's got a little bit of swing to it.
It does swing.
And I love it.
A heavy shuffle to it. Yeah, it does. And it's exceptionally melodic. It's some of the best verses, and the chorus is very memorable. The whole song is maybe the most accessible of the whole record.
Why wasn't it a single?
Yeah,
that's a bit of a head scratch.
That would be a good question, because that's a great song.
It is, but it definitely in 2023 it doesn't get the love it deserves, and people sort of forget. So the spotlight I'm putting back on Starstruck, and I think for the purposes of this show, it is a deep cut. So
absolutely, agree completely. Great choice. Never go wrong with that track. My number 2 is kind of outside of the beaten path for him. I've talked about this to a couple other people, but I really want to reiterate this one. This is from 1999. This is from a tribute album to Alice Cooper called Humanary Stew. And this featured a tremendous group of players, 3 of which sadly are no longer with us. Ronnie, Steve Lukather, and the late Bob Kulick on guitar, Phil Sasson on bass, Paul Taylor from Winger, and Steve Perry on keyboards, and the late Randy Castile on drums. They do a tribute to Welcome to My Nightmare. And it is just a remarkable performance. The various levels to Ronnie's voice, from a smooth start, no distortion. As he moves through the song, his voice gets more and more and more intense. Blistering guitar solo from Lukather. And then he just gets to the final verses and just unleashes. And it's pure Ronnie. And I will say this, and you can start your hate mail all you want. I prefer this night and day to the original. And if I want to listen to Welcome to My Nightmare, this is the version I'm going to. So if you haven't heard this, go check out Welcome to My Nightmare from 99's Humanary Stew. The whole album is really good, but this performance really stands out.
I'll check it out. Look, there were so many tribute albums that were coming out.
A lot were bad
in the 2000s, and a lot of them are kind of meh. They're not that great, but I'll definitely. This has sort of piqued my interest, so I'll definitely check this one out.
This was produced by Bob Kulick.
Nice.
So everything on it's really good. So there you go.
Beautiful. All right. Continuing the theme of just going all over the shop, different eras, I'm going to put the spotlight on the Dream Evil album. This is an album that I think is high quality, and it gets neglected because one Vivian Campbell is not on the album, so replaced by Craig Goldie. And maybe I'm a little bit sentimental and I've got an emotional attachment. This was the lineup that I saw when they toured Sydney or Australia for the first and only time. So I've got wonderful memories. The whole album of Dream Evil is very kind of straight, more linear. I appreciate Vivian Campbell's guitar work is much more wilder. It's more meat and potatoes, but the directness I really enjoy. And that's why I choose the first song on side 1. I like Night People, and I think that's a bit of a deep cut.
Great choice.
I love the tension, the build-up, the tension. It's a very stop-start sort of song. but Ronnie's vocals are just absolutely soaring over this really deep riff. It's, as I said, I put it into a meat and potatoes. There's nothing terribly fancy. It's direct, but I love the lyric. He loves to talk about the themes of night and day, and this one he's just exploring about those people that just live for the night. They live under the neon. You know, day is something completely alien to them. You know, they just come alive at night, and he just explores those sort of themes, and he does it wonderfully. But I think it's a great album opener, and one that doesn't get a lot of love. In fact, the whole album doesn't get a lot of love. People talk about Vivian Campbell rightly, but they seem to forget about Craig Goldie. And he had a tough gig to do, and I think he did a wonderful job. And this album, to me, needs more love. Dream Evil. But anyway, Night People, that's my second choice.
That's a great track. And it is a very overlooked record, and that's an unfortunate result. That should not be the case. Show more love for Dream Evil, people. This one is even further out of the beaten path. This was a one-off that Ronnie did on an album called Free World with Mintaka Higuchi and the band Dream Castle. And you're like, who in the world is that? Well, Higuchi is best known. He was the drummer for Loudness in their heyday. And he put together an album of really strong players. And Ronnie joined in on a track called What Cost War. And this was released in Japan in 97. This is probably one of Dio's most punishing vocal performances. This is full on rage. It is intense. It is crushingly heavy. It's got vitriol. The topic is, oh, stay on top. We can't be falling. The hate machine, its engines roar from the ground. The aggression's rising. But what's it for? What cost war? And he really is commentating, on what are we doing? Everything's the war machine. Everything is attack and conquer and crush and subvert and everything. And this track just lays it down so heavy. And again, I challenge anybody, once you hear it, to find anything in Dio's catalog that is this aggressive. And it's just an unbelievable change of pace for maybe what most people would think Ronnie was doing. And it's just so well done. And Higuchi's such a great drummer, and the thing just drives and is propulsive beyond belief. So What Cost War from, I always get his name wrong, Mitaka Higuchi with Dream Castle and the album Free World. Well, check it out. It's a deep, deep track. Obviously, most people have never heard of it, but we're here to teach people as well. Go find it. And if you like Ronnie, it's a must hear. And unfortunately, Higuchi passed away in 2008. So yeah, look, you've made that compelling. I'll track that down. And well done for the pronunciations. I would have just fluffed that. So I just would have put the name up. Right. No, good one. No, again, another very angry Dio song. Everyone says Dio was just, his lyrics were about demons and wizards, but he actually went beyond that. There was a lot of social commentary, and there was a sort of a, dare I say, a romantic side to him that comes out in a few songs here and there, which may talk about it as the selections go. But that song that you're just describing sounds like he had a lot of anger and a lot of fire in the belly. And again, it was in that period where it was the lean years. So maybe that was a part of the reason why he was so angry, that he was just feeling kind of, I don't know if the word's helpless, but just feeling that he wasn't sort of in control of his destiny, because, simply 10 years ago, he was playing stadiums, but in around this time, he's playing clubs, right? Because of the shifting changes of music. Well, and I have to tell you, Peter, that it was very kind of unsettling the first time I heard it. It really is so angry. it is almost just a screaming rage, but his voice is so suited for that. And he has such an ability to channel so many emotions that I was like, okay, I kind of finished and went, broke the sweat off. Let's go back and find out what he's really doing, because it really is intense.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say, if things are a little bit unstable in your personal life or in your working life, artistically it comes out. Right. And I sort of sense that around this era, this was sort of an avenue for him to get a lot of the frustration. Would that be fair to say, Pete?
I think it's exceptionally well said. And I think that's true with both the positive emotions that people feel and the negative emotions that people feel when they're channeled into art. A lot of times we get very great things because most of the time it's honest. And honest art is always the truest art. Doesn't mean we have to like or dislike it. Those are personal tastes. But the things that always seem to last or are respected, at least, are things that came out of honesty and truth and those types of things. And music is no different. And this has something in it that, I mean, if he didn't feel it, he wouldn't have done it.
Absolutely. And he's totally authentic. And one thing you can't say, whether you like him as an artist or not, he's authentic. Because as you go through his career, when he was told by people in the band who were in a higher or a more powerful position that I want you to write the song in this manner, he goes, nope, I'm taking the street. I'm out.
Not going to do it. Right.
Like Rainbow Down to Earth. Let's get more commercial. Sorry, I'm out of here.
It's not my gig.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a great pick. And all right, the next one I'm going to talk about is a song off Heaven and Hell that needs a little bit more spotlight, and it's Walk Away. Excellent. And this is an interesting song. From a theme perspective, it's not going into the light and, into the heaven and hell or the light and the dark. It's more about talking about things on planet Earth regarding relationships. And he's talking about a girl that's very alluring, but you've got to walk away because she may want to have a child by you. And it's, the initial lyric where it says, Lord, she's handsome as she flows across the floor. It's talking about a woman who's handsome. It's a bit faint praise. There's a little bit of sting in the lyrics when you look at it. And there's a couple of songs that Ronnie does that are kind of cautionary tales, like Starstruck.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Walk Away, even Country Girl. You look at the themes of these lyrics, they're always a bit of a cautionary tale that, I've been smitten by a girl, but I know there's a sting in the tail and I need to walk away or I need to beware. And it seems to be a little bit of a theme when he talks about relationships. So I think that's just an interesting theme. This kind of sticks out in Heaven and Hell. It's sort of like an outrider. It just doesn't feel like anything else on the album. Musically, it's interesting. Like at the end where Tony does this sort of there's a riff right at the end, and it sounds a little bit like Die Young. I don't know. It sort of it changes it up a little bit, makes it like doomy. But no, I like it. It's a very Black Sabbath song. That's what I think I'm trying to say. Interesting double tracking vocals. Yeah, I just think if you want to listen to a song that's completely different to what Dio does in his template, this is the song for you. And I think it deserves a little bit of love, Walk Away. And I don't think they played this too often live, to be quite frank.
No, I don't think it would have either. It's a great track. And the highs of Heaven and Hell are viewed so high that a lot of times nobody goes in below those Neon and of course the title track and Die Young. They don't go back and a lot of times dig into some of those other tracks. And that's a shame because that's a great example of another song that is really, really great.
Yeah. There's a school of thought and criticism that Ronnie was very comfortable talking about the fantasy, the Lord of the Rings, the demons and wizards, but he wasn't a sort of guy that seemed to be very comfortable talking about the sensual, talking about the opposite sex. But I disagree, but he had his own perspective. And as I said, a lot of those songs were very much about beware. You know, and maybe that was like a reflection on his personal life. Who knows?
No, you're right. It's a great call, Peter.
All right. What's your next one?
Mine comes from his time with Black Sabbath. But this wasn't on a full album release. This was done in 2007 on a box set, which is a very important box set for a lot of reasons. One, as a compilation of the material from the Sabbath era, but it sparked the friendships and the renewal of the members of the band, and then got them back together so they could run out the rest of the time that Ronnie had left with us as Heaven and Hell. And it's the Dio years box set. They recorded 3 new tracks for the box set so they could say, hey, it's not just rehashed stuff. We've actually got new material. The Devil Cried is the one that kind of got the most press, but I'm not choosing that one. I'm picking a track called Ear in the Wall, which is a fast-paced, up-tempo. Of course, it's the vintage lineup of Iommi, Butler, Dio with Vinny Appice. And this is just an exceptional track. I'll get to Ronnie in a second. First, I'm going to say categorically, Tony on these 3 tracks, and especially this one, has never sounded better ever in his career. It might be my favorite guitar tone that Tony had over his entire career. Take the sound that he had in Mob Rules and throw another 10,000 watts behind it, and that's what it sounds like. It's enormous. It is so thick and so huge. And Ronnie is laser focused on this and sounds just absolutely amazing. Clearly a standout, and this would have really been a heralded track had it had been on any of those studio records that they had done together. It does get lost on this box set, I think, but it's absolutely essential listening. And I didn't get into the lyrics deep on this one, but I was just so blown away by the musicality and Ronnie's delivery and everything. This is vintage Black Sabbath of this second Mark II era. And it's essential listening for both the Sabbath fan and the Dio fan that you explore Ear on the Wall from the Dio years box set from 2007.
Good stuff. I remember buying the CD and hearing those tracks, and they sort of were seamless with the rest of the material. Mm-hmm. Like, there's nothing worse when you get a greatest hits and somebody, the band actually record new tracks, and it sticks out like dog's balls. It's terrible. Like,
you don't have a patent on that, do you?
Van Halen, I'm talking to you, and some other bands. It sticks out. But this one, it just fits in with the material. And I can tell you, one of my highlights of my concert going career was seeing Heaven and Hell play Sydney, and they were just it was majestic. It was just like metal opera.
Well, and they were so happy.
Yes. Tony smiled a few times. Tony was smiling.
And you talked about, and rightly so, all the anger.
Yep.
Ronnie's anger was gone.
Mm.
It was gone.
Yep.
He was doing what he really wanted to do all along with who he really wanted to do it all along with. And I don't think that is understated. That's at least my view on it. But
absolutely.
Excuse me. But
yeah, no, they were just magnificent, and they played a number of those new tracks, and yeah, it just fitted in with the rest of the material.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Great pick. I'm going to go back in time to 1972 to a band called Elf. And I'm coming back for you. I think this is probably the peak of the tracks for me in respect of Ronnie James Dio and those early Elf albums. I think broadly, I find a lot of Elf a little bit too polite to my musical palette comparative to what he was going to come up with in Rainbow and Black Sabbath and the Dio band. It's a little bit understated, a little bit undercooked. It's a kind of R&B. I would describe it there, going even to like a Rolling Stones type feel. But this song is kind of rousing. His vocals are sitting a little bit behind the music, but it's got a great piano line. And I think this is another period in Ronnie's life where he was truly happy, had all these buddies with him, and he was sort of, maybe he wasn't quite finding his musical feet yet, but from a personal level, what I've read, I think he was truly happy. And it just comes out in this song. He's just exuberant. You know, the playing is just fine. You've got Mickey LaSalle on piano, David Feinstein, Gary Driscoll on drums. It's just a great sort of musical track. But yeah, I've got to put Elf in. A little bit of Spotlight, even though it's not quite to my taste, but I think this is the best out of all of them. And I'm coming back for you off the 1972 Elf album. What do you think of Elf?
I love Elf. And I kind of look at it this way, and I was going to ask you what your thought was, if you concurred or not. To me, this is a precursor and a lighter version of kind of where Coverdale ended up with Whitesnake post Deep Purple. It's Whitesnake's heavier, but if you take the essence of it, take Elf, make it heavier, you kind of get Whitesnake early on. That's kind of how I see it.
I agree. I've never thought about it until you just raised it then, but I think those early Elf albums are very similar to the David Coverdale first album, solo album.
Yes.
Definitely in the same soundscape. And who's the producer? Roger Glover.
Roger Glover, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
no,
I didn't know.
Well spotted. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, definitely the same sonics. But yeah, look, you listen to that first Elf album. Could you imagine that he was going to be the leather-lunged maestro that was going to be singing Last in Line? No, not really.
No, but if you heard him with the Prophets or the Red Caps, you would have never thought he would have gone to Elf.
Absolutely. He's been right there at the start of rock. It's amazing, an amazing career. And folks, you've got to check out the Dreamers Never Die, the documentary. It's a wonderful documentary worth checking out.
And read the autobiography, because it fills in some of those holes as well.
Yeah. Did it leave you wanting more?
Of course it did.
The documentary?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, people like you and I, and that we want to know more. We want to know more. I'm like, what were you thinking in the studio? Why? How did you come up with this riff? How did you? And nobody's going to go that deep, but that's kind of where you want it to go. At least I can say for me personally. But it's such a big career, and there's so much to cover in a short period of time. Not making it too nerdy that you alienate the casual fan or someone who may come in curiosity. And there's not enough of us complete wildly off the other spectrum to sustain it. So you've got to live in the middle somewhere. But yeah, you're always looking for more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also was asking about the book. Do you think there's a Definity Book to be written about Dio?
I think the book was kind of like highlight point,
PowerPoint presentation.
Didn't go too deep, and it kind of jumped periods. And I mean, again, it's such a long career that you could just write about the Rainbow part. You could write just about the Sabbath part. You could write about his solo part. Any of those separately, and even the Elf and pre-Elf. Without it being, this thick and, running the risk, like I said, of boring everybody to death, or just looking at it and just being intimidated just from a sheer size standpoint. There's always more. And I thought the movie helped kind of put the two of them together, and you maybe have a little more definitive look than just any of the one on their own, is the way I would think about it.
Yeah, look, you need somebody with fire in the belly, passion as a writer to ask the hard questions and get to the
right,
and ask the right people and be dogged and follow it through. I still think there's the Definity Book to be written. It's a little bit thin.
And I think too, sadly, and I've already mentioned several musicians who are no longer with us, including Ronnie, of course. You can only get certain amounts of stories for people who are actually there. And, if you're looking at the Rainbow, Richie's not talking to anybody. You're not getting anything from him. And Tony Carey's not about to talk to anybody. And his was a small snippet anyways. Jimmy's gone, Cozy's gone, and Ronnie's gone. Kind of, that's the beauty of somebody like a Bob Daisley who's around, that you can just hear these stories over and over because they were in so many different camps. But yeah, more is always better than less. So
absolutely. All right. So it's your turn?
Yep. Number 5.
Number 5.
I'm going back to Black Sabbath, and I'm going to the Mob Rules, and I am picking the song Over and Over. And I put in, no one ever talks about this song, and the slow, powerful, hypnotic tempo and the beautiful drumming of Vinny. Geezer's bass playing is great, and Ronnie just soars over this thing. And this is a song of heavy reflection. Just the first verse, sometimes I feel like I'm dying at dawn, and sometimes I'm warm as fire. But lately I feel like I'm just gonna rain, and it goes over and over and over. Sometimes I cry, and I cry for the lost and alone. I'm going to use this word, and people are going to go, what? It's almost tender. It's human. It's thought-provoking. It is empathetic, wrapped in this extremely powerful, slow, intense ballad with long lyrical lines where Ronnie is such an enigma on a lot of levels, but one of his greatest strengths is the hardest thing for singers to do is to sing slower songs, because you have to hold the notes longer because there's more space. And only the better vocalists with the better support and the better techniques are able to really pull off these really slow songs. And Ronnie was the master of it. I just think this is one of the highlights of Mob Rules, and it just reinforces to me why I have always favored Mob Rules over Heaven and Hell in my camp. And I don't think there's a weak second on that album, and all of the inner tracks. And I also think it's one of Martin's greatest productions. I think the album just sounds enormous.
I agree with you completely. I think the production's crisper, and
yes,
the recent remasters that came out, I bought both. Mm-hmm. And to me, Mob Rules is the one that sort of pops out of the speakers a lot more than Heaven and Hell. Heaven and Hell seems a little bit, I don't know, maybe the word's not muffly, but a little bit underbaked. It's not as crisp, but I like the songs on Heaven and Hell a little bit better than Mob Rules, but I love the
Can't go wrong either way.
On Mob Rules a lot better. It's just so crisp. Right. So
it's maybe the long live rock and roll of the Sabbath era.
Absolutely. All right. Well, my number 5 is a deep cut off the Long Live Rock and Roll album. And in fact, I think the whole album, with the exception of Long Live Rock and Roll, is one big deep cut because it doesn't get a lot of spotlight. There's some wonderful, wonderful tracks on it. I think it's in the shadow of Rainbow Rising. Everyone talks about Rainbow Rising, and rightly so. But I think in some tracks on that album, Blackmore actually exceeds and raises the bar even higher as a personal best. I'm talking at, Gates of Babylon, for example. That guitar lead break is absolutely sublime. But anyway, going a bit off track, the track that I'm going to pick for this show is Lady of the Lake.
Excellent.
Now, Lady of the Lake was on the B-side to LA Connection. I always thought LA Connection was a little bit honky-tonk, a little bit straightforward, not so interesting. I always used to flip over the single and play Lady of the Lake, and I love that wonderful double track or triple track slide guitar of Richie, yes, and the lyrics of Dio, which are really in his, he is just so comfortable. He's in his template of the mystical woman, and, the sort of the wizards and the fantasy aspect. And it's just like a pair of slippers he's just put on and just feels so comfortable. And I think it's a really compelling track and I love it.
It's one of my favorites on the album, Peter, by far.
Yeah. And it just doesn't get any spotlight whatsoever. It is the deepest track on Long Live Rock and Roll. And that's my number 5 pick. But do you agree, like, that whole album sort of is in the shadow of Rainbow Rising?
Yes, it is. And there's some really great versatility in things that go on there. Cozy's playing on it is exceptional. I just think there's so much great stuff on there. And, if someone's going to focus on, one track or one that doesn't kind of get the love, but, you had mentioned it, Gates of Babylon is every bit as epic as anything that they ever did. And, it's just got such a great feel to it. And
the degree of technical difficulty in that lead break is like to the power of 7.2. Well, if you thought Stargazer was a difficult lead break.
And there's your neoclassical that Malmsteen and those guys all grabbed onto. It's right there. Because there's all the harmonic minors. There's all the Eastern tonalities, all of the modal stuff that he was doing. It's all right there on one track. And it's a Blackmore
masterclass.
Yeah.
Blackmore masterclass. Probably the problem with this album, it's got one foot in the old with the neoclassical, but there's a 1 foot you can see that he's putting the seeds of, I want to get played on radio. I want to be a little bit more commercial. But this lineup's great. David Stone is a great keyboardist. Just look at the Live in Munich DVD. He's probably one of my favorite Rainbow keyboardists. Bob Daisley is just solid.
Right.
And he's Australian. No, anyway, but besides that, that guy's got his footprints on all of the major rock albums.
Right.
I know Blackmore played bass a lot on that album, but Daisley, had a major contribution. But I love that song, Lady of the Lake. It just needs more spotlight.
Yeah, I do too. Great groove to it. Do you want to go to next ones or you want to just kind of?
I want to do some honorable mentions.
All righty. So we'll do the short condensed versions. You want me to just give all of mine or one at a time?
Oh, just one at a time. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
My next honorable mention is from 92 from the Dehumanizer album and the track Too Late. I think this is the standout track on Dehumanizer. It's a deep, deep track. Again, I have a theme here with a lot of the Sabbath ones that I'm picking. They're slow, but they're exceptionally heavy, which makes a perfect showcase for Ronnie's vocals. And that's what we're really kind of talking about here in its nutshell. It's extremely heavy. The choruses are huge and enormous. And Ronnie is singing so effortlessly, but yet it's so big and so grandiose with these crushing power chords and things underneath. And it goes back to a whisper, and then it rips your head off and back to a whisper. And I think it's one of the highlights of their whole Sabbath. And again, it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite track on Dehumanizer. So Too Late from 92's Black Sabbath Dehumanizer album.
Nice. And that's another album that doesn't get enough attention. Mm-hmm. Everyone just talks about Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules.
Right. Wasn't
even covered, barely, in the documentary. I don't think it actually raised a mention, which was a glaring omission, because it definitely deserves to be spoken about, and quite highly. The track I'm going to pick as a honorable mention is off the Sacred Heart album, and it's Like the Beat of a Heart.
Yes.
And it's a bit of a sludgy, doomy song, but I've always liked it. And if you listen to the rhythm section, it's almost a replication of Heaven and Hell. Dun, 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 dun.
Right.
And Ronnie loves that sort of rhythm because he could just riff over it. And just, that's what he does, he does his, I think, his vocal intonations when he's talking like a beat of a heart, it's just so much passion, and you actually believe what he's saying. So, Sacred Heart was critically panned in the day. I think that it deserves much more of a spotlight because it was in the shadow of Holy Diver and The Last in Line. But, I don't think it's a perfect album, but there are some tracks on it that definitely need some recognition, and that's one of the songs that I've really always gravitated to, and that's Like the Beat of a Heart.
Well, and the common denominator for a lot of these is Vinny Appice.
Yeah.
Very few drummers can play slow and heavy as brilliantly as he does.
Doomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's his forte. He's the best at it.
Okay, Pete, what's your next pick?
My next one is from Mob Rules again. And this one is the opposite of the slow and the heavy and the kind of doomy. I think this may be my favorite Black Sabbath with Dio era song.
It's a deep cut.
Why is it an honorable mention? Well, they're all great. Like we said, there is no rankings here. And this is Falling Off the Edge of the World.
This is my favorite Sabbath song, but I was almost going to pick that, but I don't know if it's a deep cut. It's almost at the level that it's getting more and more recognized, but I'm so grateful that you've included it.
They pulled it out as Heaven and Hell. I don't believe they ever played it as Black Sabbath. And that's just an absolute shame. The range of this track, its dynamics, and look, anything that's got a gong in it works for me. But this is just so heavy and one of Iommi's greatest riffs. And Ronnie is so intense and so ferocious. And the chills have never left me every time I hear this, especially when they come back for the last verse. And it's just like, okay. It's just, you get those goosebumps. And I just think it's one of the most amazing things they've ever done. And this needs to be talked about with Die Young and Mob Rules and the title track, everything. This is one of those tracks that should have been that way, and sadly it wasn't. But this is shine the light, because this is a stunning track and just epic.
What he said. That's all I got. It's magnificent, and I've got one word to describe this song: opera.
Yes,
it's opera. That was the highlight of the show when I saw Heaven and Hell. And the bit where it goes really doomy. It's like Wagner.
Yes.
With the boom, the gong out.
And the lightning and the thunder.
And the lighting on Ronnie. It's drama. It's opera. And then when it changes pace, what a ripper. What a ripper of a riff, you know. I agree with you. I think that is the finest Black Sabbath featuring Ronnie track. Love it. I didn't include it in this show because I would have stolen it. I would have picked it as one of my selections, but because I think it's a little bit above a deep cut. But I'm so grateful that you've included it because, I've got nothing much more to say. But if you really want to have one song, we could do a show on this. One song that sums up a band's sound, I would pick that. I would pick that above Heaven and Hell.
It's got everything.
Yep. No, and that's the sweet spot.
With that brilliant production that they've going on, it just cracks you right across the forehead like a 2x4. And it's just such a great way to get knocked out.
In a nice way, folks. In a nice way. We don't like violence.
That's right. Allegedly.
All right. Well, I'll finish it off. I'm going to do a bit more sweetness and light song because all the picks that I've done with Ronnie need a spotlight, but they're a little bit out of the usual Ronnie wheelhouse. And I'm going to pick Country Girl. Again, it's a little bit lyrically, it's something really different. And Tony and Geezer, when they heard this, when this was pitched to them, they go, what are you doing? They really found difficulty in grappling with the lyrics. And it wasn't the easiest song, what I can see through interviews to lay down. But again, it's another Ronnie song about the opposite sex, and it's a warning song. He's smitten, he's bedazzled by this lovely lady, country girl, but when you get to the final chorus and when you get to the final verse, I should say, he turns it around and say, get away. It's not sweetness and light. You've got to be wary. So it falls into the Ronnie cautionary engagement with the opposite sex type of song. But again, it's a compelling song, and I love his vocals. And interesting enough, when Ronnie passed, they did the Download Festival tribute in England, and one Glenn Hughes. They had all different all-stars that got up on stage and did a couple of Ronnie songs. And when Glenn Hughes got up on stage, and he did this song. So worth checking out on YouTube, and he did a wonderful version of it. So,
Well, middle section, when he goes into the In Dreams, I think of you, I don't know what to do with myself, is just so emotional and sweeping, and it's just full of sentiment, and it just is a great contrast to the heavy riff that it starts and ends with. And so if you just listen to the beginning and thought, well, maybe I don't like the riff, it's a little
bit conventional, and then it takes
if you didn't hear it all the way through, and then it came back, and I think that's one of the strengths of that track.
Yeah. So similar to Walk Away, this is a song. It's probably a companion piece. This is a song that sticks out. I won't mention what I compared it to previously, but it sticks out, and it's something a little bit different out of the Ronnie James Dio wheelhouse, and therefore it's a deep cut and needs a spotlight. So
I agree.
Thanks, Pete. As always, you deliver the goods, delivering the goods. And look, it's always fun to talk about Ronnie James Dio. And, you know, let's face it, the Rainbow Black Sabbath family is just something we can just talk for endlessly. It's a rich tapestry of just so much great music. And you know, our viewers just need to just explore it. And that's what I encourage them to do. So please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Please check out Pete on we've done a lot of fantastic chats, and thank you for the viewers for the support and your comments. I know Pete and I, we read them and we really appreciate, and we're going to be doing some more shows, and you can check Pete on a number of other channels, and I will put the links down to that. And please check out some of the other chats that Pete's doing. So, Peter, as always, thank you. Thank you, viewers. We will see you very shortly. Cheers.